So here's the challenge. It's 17:30, it's a long time since the coffee break. A lot of what I want to talk about people have already presented for the last 3 hours. How can I keep the audience awake and stop them going shopping on such a lovely sunny evening in Munich? I'll do my best. Let's see how we do. So what I want to talk about indeed is 6G activities at the EU level. So obviously we're seeing an example of the regional level today with this wonderful summit on for the Thinknet, which is more being driven from the regional Bavarian level. There are also national activities, which we've seen with the national hubs. But clearly, 6G, as in 5G and 4G, is not going to be, hopefully, something from a region or a single country or a single geographical area. We need a global standard, and I hope that's something we can all agree on. And so we need to try and connect these activities together, the regional, the national, and indeed the European, and across the European with other parts of the world. So let's have a look at the European level, what's going on. Maybe before I look at that in some detail, I can talk a little bit about the organization I'm representing. So I'm here today representing the 5GIA, as was rightly said, and perhaps rather confusing. We're having to change our name to 6GIA. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do hasn't changed. We're trying to be the voice of European industry for everything to do with these cellular systems, be that 5G or 6G or whichever number we ever get to. And when we say European industry, we don't mean that in the narrow sense. It's not just about Ericsson and Nokia and Orange and Deutsche Telekom. They are there, but equally we have the SMEs, the universities, the research institutes, and indeed many of the verticals. So we have the complete ecosystem there to really discuss, develop, research, all the things we need to do to try and bring the next generation of cellular networks to reality. So one of the key things I mentioned there was research, and that's one of the things we invest a lot of energy in. And one of the things we're responsible for is the existing partnership 5G PPP. We've already heard about HexaX, which is an example of one of the projects that's running there. But I'd like to, if I may, come back to old-fashioned 5G. Now, today is about 6G, but I think we need to understand that in the context of where we are in the overall life cycle of these technologies. And today is really 5G is the key technology. This is the technology we are deploying. These are the products we are developing. We are very much at the start of the 5G story. So we are just about to start 5G Advanced with release 18 and release 19. And we're trying to make sure that we can actually achieve that promise of 5G. Because we did have that vision to start with. It wasn't just about another G. It was about trying to link up these new domains, these new industries. That we haven't fully achieved. We still have a lot of work to go. Okay, what do we do in this 5G PPP? Well, we can broadly split this partnership. So this partnership invested something like 700 million euros of public funding, trying to bring leadership in Europe to 5G. And if we look at it and we look at these three phases, the first phase, phase one, which started sort of 2014, 2015, was very much about developing the fundamental technology and concepts. In other words, it's sort of about the time we are now with 6G. And we can see from that partnership that we actually created a lot of what we currently call 5G. What's very strange in the telecoms world is we invent the name for things, and then afterwards we define what they actually mean. And we're at that stage with 6G at the moment to some extent. We have a name, 6G, but now's the time to try and find out what that actually means. What are the requirements? What are the use cases? What are the base technologies? In terms of 5GPP, what we then did was we then went on and tried to apply that technology to new areas, new domains, not just the teenagers with the smartphones or the existing telecommunications applications, but things like Industry 4.0, automotive, smart media, smart network, smart cities, all of these new areas that we've also mentioned today. And then lastly, we had these innovation platforms, this idea of trying to create platforms where new companies could come with new ideas and new services, hopefully create the new Facebook, the new Google in Europe. Let's see how we do there. But also as part of this phase 3, we started building the bridge to the future. So we had a last call, which was ICT 52. And in ICT 52, we had this set of 6G or beyond 5G projects. And that's the start of the story of 6G research in Europe. We have heard about Hexa-X today, the one in the middle, which is this flagship project. But there are also in actual fact, another 9. There's one just been started, another 9 projects around that, creating, if you will, overall that roadmap for Europe moving forward. And these, most of them have started in January this year and will be running for the next 2.5 or 3 years. So the message is we have started 6G research in Europe. In addition to that, we have, within the Infrastructure Association, created a white paper. So this has involved these 6G projects, but also many other companies and organizations working together, trying to map out what we think 6G should be. And this again is available and hopefully is a useful stepping stone towards 6G. So those previous projects are building the bridge from this partnership, 5G PPP, to the next partnership, which I'll be talking about, Smart Networks and Services, and equally building the bridge from 5G to 6G. Clearly, the 5G PPP program has now, or the partnership has now made its last call. There'll be no more projects. So those ICT 52 was the last set of projects. We're getting up to nearly 100 projects we've run over the last 7 years. And clearly, I think we can see that as a success. We've had a lot of contributions to standardization, a lot of scientific papers. I think one of the key things has also been pre-standardization consensus. As was mentioned by Volker earlier, we have a unique situation in Europe that we can bring together all of the key players for collaborative research. And this is not the case in other places in the world. If you go in direction Asia, you tend not to have the Americans involved. If you go direction North America, you tend not to have some of the Asians involved. In other words, the only place really where everyone can come together is Europe. And that is an advantage we need to use. And more generally, we need now a new partnership to really drive 6G in the same way that 5GPP drove 5G. And that is what this Smart Networks and Services is about. This proposal, this idea didn't come out of thin air, and it's not just a question of my own association creating it. Because we believe 6G is going to be more than just 5G++, it's not just more of the same. We believe that it will, and indeed a lot of the presentations today have mentioned, actually involve a number of new technologies being integrated, be that AI, be that cloud, be that IoT. And therefore what we did was we reached out to other associations to actually join us in creating this proposal, to make sure we pick the right technologies, the right directions for Europe going forward. And in total, we've had somewhere around 1,000 organizations involved in actually preparing this partnership proposal. And in terms of funding, we're talking about somewhere around 900 million euros of public funding over the next 7 years, trying to bring us that leadership in 6G. What are we going to try and achieve? What are the high-level objectives? Well, unsurprisingly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, again, create in the first instance, in those first projects, that foundational technology, the concepts for 6G, if you will. Behind that name, put some substance. But there are some other things which we also need to do, and I think this has also been mentioned today, that it's not enough to consider the technology in isolation. We also need to think about the applications, about the users. And that means we need to start thinking about new applications. What are the new possibilities? We've talked about holograms and extended VR and things like this. We need to understand those, and we need to work together with those other vertical industries to make sure we are using the technology or developing the technologies to really meet or address those requirements. We then have reinforced Europeans' technological leadership. I think we're all aware that there is a geopolitical aspect. I think we're all aware that these cellular technologies have gone from being a luxury to being an underpinning infrastructure for our whole digital industry and digital society. And this seems to be a trend that's ever increasing. When you look at a lot of the 5G applications or domains, some of those are safety critical. Some of those actually underpin so much of our everyday life, be that electricity, be that water, be that internet access. I mean, what has the COVID disaster actually taught us about what's important? Mobile communications is certainly one of the areas we've seen ever increasing importance. And with that in mind, it's clearly important that we have access to that technology now and in the future. And that's one of the goals of this partnership. And then we have one which sounds a bit strange, really: safeguard European values. Now, in first sight, you say, well, what have values got to do with technology? It sounds a world away. But in actual fact, if you think about what this means, if you think of some of the values that perhaps are more prevalent in Europe than some other parts of the world, there is a rationale there. If we're talking about, for example, personal data security, I think we're all aware of some of the deficiencies today. There's some of the issues with Facebook and other stuff where, there is no personal data protection. And if you want that, if that's important for you, it's not a given unless the technology supports that, unless the technology has those hooks to actually enable that. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about taking those values and trying to make sure the technology can support that in the future. Because to be honest, if we don't do that from Europe, it won't get done. Okay, what are we actually going to look at? Now, I haven't got very much time, so I'll just... I've got 4 minutes, have I? Was that 4 or 5? 4. That's a 4. I've got very little time, even less time than I thought. I'm still going to show this slide, I'm sorry. So I wanted one vaguely technical slide because I felt I ought to have at least one. This is just trying to show the breadth of what we're looking at. So it's a huge area which 6G encompasses. And you'll notice that a lot of it is... In the telecoms world, we're very fond of talking about the radio access and the physical layer and that being all important. And clearly there is an aspect there. But with 6G, we believe there's even more above that line, even more from the softwareization. And we need to try and encompass all of that. So maybe I can just finish talking a little bit about timeline. So I've talked about this smart networks and services, this wonderful new partnership. The plan is that the legal basis for this will be in November this year. So we hope to start this in November. We hope to have the first call out in December this year. And then we hope to start the projects, the first set of projects, by the end of next year, December next year. That's a sort of rough timeline. All the information is on the web to look at. I would also perhaps like to give 2 minutes just saying, we'd love you to come and join our association so that together we can shape what 6G is in Europe. Open invitation, everything's on the web. Thank you very much.